The Trump administration is pushing to fire federal workers quicker. Instead of taking months, it'll take just days. Plus, we have a layoff update coming from the Department of Homeland Security. Will federal workers keep due process? How will it impact you? Let's get into it. On Tuesday, OPM published a proposed rule in the Federal Register that could make firing federal employees faster. The plan? Expand suitability and fitness checks. This is normally reserved for new applicants. They want to make it for all federal employees. So if they find out you do not meet the standard, you're gone in 5 days. That's all it will take. Now, a lot of people, they don't understand these checks. What encompasses this? I'm going to give you some examples. So this could be criminal or dishonest conduct, misconduct or negligence in employment, excessive alcohol use, illegal use of drugs, and intentional false statements. That's by no means a comprehensive list. These are just some examples. So OPM has said that in the past, federal agencies have been bogged down by overly cumbersome and restrictive procedures to remove workers that were accused of misconduct. And if you worked in the federal government for at least a few years, you probably know exactly what we're talking about here. On occasions, you might have a federal worker that's doing the wrong thing, that isn't performing to standard, or there's some misconduct involved. You set up a performance improvement plan. They're not following it. Somehow they're able to weasel their way out of it, and they end up working across the hall in a new office. And it becomes difficult. So this whole plan here is to hold standards the same for people that are just entering the federal government to people who've been there for decades. The acting OPM director says misconduct is met with consequence, and public service is a privilege, not a right. But as you're reading what is unsuitable, you will see that federal agencies, they have a lot of room for interpretation. They have a lot of leeway. They can add categories in there. Then there's this idea, there's this feeling that OPM is going to encourage people to report their coworker. So there's going to be like an anonymous tip line where you could just call in or email and say, hey, you know, Deborah that works on 3 cubicles that way, Deborah has a DUI. This weekend she went out drinking. She has a DUI. We should look into that. You know, so people could potentially use it in creative ways. Critics like Suzanne from Federal Workers Legal Defense Project says it's completely in opposition to the rights owed to these workers. Normally under Title V of the U.S. Code, tenured federal workers, they get a fair shot. Agencies have to prove poor performance, give notice, and rate you accurately. And if not, you can appeal. But under this new rule, it fast tracks firings. And it's very narrow on what you can appeal to the MSPB. The former OPM director calls it an end run around established processes, saying OPM's in no position to second guess agencies about your job. So is this all about accountability and making sure we have the right people in the right position? Or is this more of a power grab, of a way to fire people when you don't agree with them, when you don't agree with their political ideology, or you do not agree with their personality? Rob Shriver warns agencies guided by OPM could take adverse actions with limited appeals. Suzanne says this is taking people who are tenured, longtime civil servants, and subjecting them to suitability determinations. How can you pull someone in and look at them eye to eye and say you're no longer suitable for this job when they've been there for 20, 30 years, 35 years, coming in, performing at a high level, and all of a sudden they're not suitable? Now, the contrary to that is, maybe they make the wrong choice on a Friday night, or they're doing something that's morally ambiguous, perhaps, or they're doing something maybe more severe. Then of course, if something like that occurs, they could fall out of suitability. But here's another thing. If you want to really take this thing and run with it, a suitability test is going to require resources of some kind, whether it's someone's time, a computer script being ran, someone reviewing it. It's going to pull more resources, probably from human resources. And if you're doing that for each and every employee, how efficient is that? The OPM is tying this to a March 2025 Trump memo and the Trusted Workforce Policy started in 2018, which is to tackle insider threats, especially for individuals that have top secret clearances. Now, they're saying that this is all about keeping standards high, but it's been done before. If you look at what the VA did, the Veteran Affairs, what they did in 2017, there was a similar law titled Department of Veteran Affairs Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act of 2017. This was pretty much a severe reaction to the 2014 scandal. In 2014, you had veterans die because of taking too long to schedule appointments, and people were just pretty much forgotten about. So that was a big VA scandal. This came in, and it was all about firing VA employees quicker. And they did. They fired 4,000 of them. Well, it turns out about 40% of them were wrongful terminations. 1,700 people, they shouldn't have been fired. In 2023, $134 million in payouts were given to wrongfully fired workers. People were unlawfully pushed out simply because of this law. This law still exists to this day, but it's not enforced. Here's a statement from the VA. The department no longer believes that the provisions of this law are necessary to discipline employees efficiently. Existing disciplinary tools are sufficient. So if this rule is enacted, is this going to be a repeat of what we saw from the VA? Is this going to be a tool to get rid of people that you don't like, that you want to get rid of potentially for discrimination? You could use it for that too. Now remember, you can publicly comment on this. You just need to go to federalregister.gov and search for it. You can make a public comment. Okay, so let's switch to the Department of Homeland Security because this agency wants to hire and fire. And the first move is eliminating the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office, or CWMD for short. This office would be split up. It would pretty much be like ripped to pieces, and every little piece of paper would go to a different agency. So there's a component of it going to the TSA. There's a component of it going to the Coast Guard. Customs is getting another component of it. And what this tells me is the jobs are not disappearing. They're just falling under another sub-agency. And when this happens and a rift goes through, the people who held that position, they should be offered the opportunity to apply for their old position at that new agency. And this is something that OPM wasn't doing in the past. That's why there's this huge appeal going through the courts, because those individuals that were working on OPM retirement systems, they were fired and never given that chance. So why is this office getting chopped? Part of the reason has to be because of low morale, and there were other attempted reorganizations within this agency. In fact, I believe it even lost its authorization in 2023. So those are some of the reasons why they're now taking it apart piece by piece. We also have more cuts. TSA is set to lose over 2,000, something like 2,600 jobs. Nearly half of them are from exit lane security in 99 airports. You know what that means? The exit lane security? That's when let's say your flight just landed and you're leaving. There's a point of no return. So there's a sterile, secure area, and then there's the public area where the ticketing happens. So the person that sits in that chair, sometimes they're on their phone, sometimes they're just not paying attention, but they're sitting there. There's a warm body sitting in that chair, kind of just looking to make sure nobody turns around and goes back into the sterile area. So DHS is saying, or TSA is saying, that the airports, it's their responsibility to cover that. So what does that mean? Hire private security guards? Hire somebody to sit in that chair? Or maybe somebody from the staff? You'll see somebody sitting there from American Airlines just kind of making sure everyone's doing the right thing. Then you have USCIS facing a $445 million cut and 900 jobs lost. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You wouldn't expect an immigration agency to be losing so many jobs, but this is mostly in refugee and asylum processing. And this, of course, is because of the different political ideology that we currently have in the administration. So immigration enforcement, those jobs are being strengthened. Those jobs are increasing. And then, speaking of that, we have good news coming out of DHS. While some agencies are cutting jobs, we have other agencies like the CBP. You know the CBP is beefing up. According to Bob Simpson, a CBP official, he says they're always hiring. They currently have over 47,000 law enforcement officers. And what's unique about law enforcement officers is there's a mandatory retirement age of 57 usually, most of the time. So you have a churn in every agency. But in other agencies, if you're not doing law enforcement, you can stay a little bit longer. You can stay into your 60s. There's people that are in their 70s still working at the USDA, for example, or the Veteran Affairs is a better example. So with law enforcement officers, there's even more of a churn. not just because people want to get out, but because they are forced to retire at 57. And with tariffs in the spotlight, CBP's beefing up their trade roles as well. You can also see that they're one of the main ones that are continuing to do these hiring events. If you are interested in hiring events, there's two main agencies that are cranking them out. Now, it's not like in 2024. In 2024, all the agencies were growing, so they all had a lot of virtual and in-person hiring events. But in 2025, the two agencies I consistently see each and every week include the CBP and the BOP, which is the Bureau of Prisons. They need their correctional officers, and they're hiring pretty much year-round at this point. They need to hire a lot more. So if you're interested in attending those hiring events for whatever reason, make sure you're signed up to the newsletter down below. There's also a much more aggressive recruiting campaign because in this political environment, you have to get a little bit more aggressive if you want people to actually join your agency. This includes recruiting with ads, sponsorships, online webinars, and incentives. $20,000 for new Border Patrol agents and $30,000 for remote spots. The CBP also has a new applicant portal. It's not usajobs.gov. It's more intuitive and it's a lot easier to use. So they have 24/7 updates over there, real-time status, and direct HR contact, which is surprising because it's kind of difficult to get a hold of HR most of the time. So it's good they're going through these links to try to encourage and entice people to join their agency. CBP also claims to offer childcare, elder care, wellness programs, and tuition assistance. So if you ever had your eyes on CBP, it seems like this is the year. This is the year for you. In addition to all of this, we have some positions opening up at the Veteran Affairs. Veteran Affairs, like all the other agencies, we're supposed to be under a hiring freeze. But there are exceptions, like the CBP and now the VA. The VA is hiring hundreds, if not over 1,000 positions. They've melted their hiring freeze somewhat because they needed these people in their roles in order to continue to provide healthcare benefits and healthcare services to veterans across this country. So if you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.